What's going on, car nerds? Welcome back to the Feel for Thought podcast. I'm Jay.
I'm Kevin.
And today we're talking about something pretty interesting. Kevin, do you want to explain what we're going to be talking about?
Yeah, we're doing a deep dive into the engineering behind Koenigsegg, the company as a whole.
I think this is long overdue because there's so much cool stuff that Koenigsegg does, especially more recent years. There's been so many cool inventions and crazy cars to come from their factory. So today we're just going to dive into some of the crazy technology, some of the inspiration and kind of slogans on their website and page that really inspired us, and just like kind of how we view the company. And then, we'd love to hear from you guys, what you guys think about Koenigsegg and maybe the future, what you think they're going to go and everything. So yeah, to kind of kick things off, I just wanted to start by saying how interesting it is because it seems like a lot of their stuff is focused on watches, and specifically Swiss watches. So how they're built, how they look, the materials that are used, kind of the intricacies of like the gears and how it kind of all works together to create this movement, I guess, in the watch hands. And they've used a lot of this inspiration to like build their cars and the parts for their cars. So yeah, before we get started, what's one thing that stood out to you about Koenigsegg over the years? I know it's obviously kind of known as like the pinnacle of like hypercars, but kind of how do you view it? Like what's your take on it?
I think for me, it's like how they push the envelope. It seems like every car, every single iteration of a car, they like really dive into something and perfect it.
Yeah.
So we had the Agera that broke the speed record, was fastest car. Then the Jesko, the Agera RS did the world record. The 1-to-1 was the first mega car. Then we had the Jesko, which is like one of the highest downforce, and then the Absolute's going to also break the record again.
Right.
The Regera, no transmission. They had the Gemera, which was like for a while the highest performance 3-cylinder, and it's just like constantly evolving. It's taking the car industry and just refining it and perfecting it.
Yeah, it's literally, I know we've talked about this before on the podcast. It's kind of this combination of like the insane feats of like obsession with cars and like making this like passion project into like a crazy company, which is amazing what Christian von Koenigsegg's been able to do. And over the years, he's built like a pretty insane team of engineers around his whole orchestration of a Swedish car company. And typically you don't think of Sweden as like a hub for car manufacturers, but somehow Koenigsegg came through the cracks and has really been wowing the world ever since they started producing cars. I think it's back in 1994 when they started, but so without further ado, let's kind of dive into some of the crazy things they've done over time. And even on their website, you can see some really interesting, if you take some time and scroll through, like even some of the things they write about their company and about what they do is really interesting. So the reason they say that they like to build a lot of the things themselves, by those things, I mean parts for cars and engines and all these things where other companies would buy those parts from another manufacturer. They say that this puts limits on what their cars can do. So they want to innovate and build those parts themselves in order to lift those limitations to kind of build beyond what might be possible with other manufacturers' parts. So that's kind of the first thing that caught my eye. It's just like the dedication.
Yeah, it's also easier to control quality because it's all in-house. You have full control, whereas
exactly
other companies, you can't really go in and tell them like, oh, you should be doing this, because they're like, no, that's my company, don't tell me what to do.
Exactly. And like, sure, you can maybe pay a shit ton of money and get them to custom make something for you, but even if you're building something complex like a transmission and you know how the inner workings function and you know how it works, it's then easy to build the car around it because you know what it can handle, you know how those things work together. So it provides this deeper level of understanding of the actual car and how the components work, which is probably one of the reasons why they've done so well in world record breaking and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely an interesting one. Definitely recommend you guys scroll through their website. There's a lot of interesting information there. But yeah, one thing that stood out to me when I was looking through all these different technologies is the way they've taken issues and common things that are maybe already kind of at the cutting edge of technology, but they've found a way that they can eliminate some of those problems to create a new category, essentially. So the first one that I want to talk about is the Quark e-motor, which is an electric motor, as it sounds. But the interesting thing here is they've actually created something called a raxial flux. And this might sound confusing, but let me explain what each one is. So you have axial flux motors and you have radial flux motors. So axial flux e-motors have more torque and less power. And then radial flux e-motors have the opposite. So they actually have more power but less torque. And so Christian saw this and his engineer saw this. They're like, okay, well, that's useless. You have something that's more torque and something that's more power. How do we choose which one we want to use? And so they're like, well, you know what, fuck it. Let's just make one that's both. So they came up with the raxial, which is, again, radial and axial put together. So it maximizes both torque and power. And the inner workings are much too complex for probably either of us to understand. But it's pretty impressive that they were to do it. And so it has the best torque to power to weight ratio in the entire industry, which is really impressive.
It's pretty interesting, the thought process, though, because like this is the process of questioning everything. Like you have two choices, both have, you know, pros and cons, and most people would be like, okay, let's pick one that suits best the car.
Yeah.
But these guys was like, why can't we just make it like both pros and make it as one?
Yeah.
And it's like, it seems so obvious, but it took however many years of people using, you know, the same thing until they came along and they're like, let's just combine them.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like they almost have this long-term vision that they're like, okay, this isn't just going to be for this car, it's going to be for every car going forward, and maybe we can move the industry forward in some way. So I kind of like that vision too. It's like a way of not just looking out for themselves and their profit maximization, but also just the industry at large, just like building on existing technology. So that's kind of the other thing too. But
it would be interesting because these are patented, right?
Yeah, I think this one is patent pending, if I'm not mistaken. I think most of their technologies are, but
because it would be kind of cool if there was no patent. I mean, of course, it doesn't make sense as a business, but if they truly wanted to revolutionize the car industry and pass this on, because we've talked about this before, where Koenigsegg has amazing engineer feats and they're pushing the boundaries, but for most people it's unattainable.
Yeah.
And either we'd love to see a car line that is obtainable for most people that uses this technology and, you know, isn't millions of dollars, or it's open source and other manufacturers can implement that and reduce the cost over time, so then we can start using it.
Yeah, honestly, that's really interesting. It's kind of like that, I forget the word you use, but it's something like open source, exactly. Like how with technology we have open source stuff, right? Like that you can modify and everything.
I know Tesla did that. A lot of their technology has been open source, and the thinking was like, this is the future. Electric cars are the future. Let's not gatekeep this and make it just us. We want everyone to do it.
Oh, I didn't even know that. That's pretty respectable, honestly.
But you can see it, like most car companies now have very good battery technology because of this.
Huh. I didn't know that.
It's helped a lot.
I've always wondered that, like how everyone got, like there's just nothing, Tesla happened, and then everything blows up. It's like, it was a little fishy to me anyways, but now that makes perfect sense. That's interesting. Huh. Well, yeah, let's hope the Koenigsegg does that. I feel like they're maybe a little bit too proprietary to get to that point. Maybe it's just a pride thing, or...
Well, no, it's a business thing, because they're putting so much money in research and development. They got to remake that somewhere. They can't.
That's true.
But, you know, at the same time, it's like, it would be nice to...
Yeah.
I'm sure they have some things that are open source or...
Yeah, probably. Like, I know some of these do have patent pending, but other ones I didn't see anything, so it could be that these are open source. Mm-hmm. Maybe they are... Like, for example, the Quark e-motor, I don't think that showed anything about a patent, but I know, like, one of the other parts that we're about to talk about does have a patent pending. So, again, it might depend on maybe the complexity and, like you said, the R&D that goes into it. That might have something to do with if they make it open source or not, but that is something that's interesting. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Next thing. So yeah, that's the e-motor, the electric motor. Another thing I found really interesting is their direct drive transmission. So as this sounds, it's pretty insane. So this is obviously one of those ones that's a patent pending. This is one I was talking about. But essentially, this cuts out the entire need for a transmission. And this is pretty insane because every car in history has had a transmission, right? You need to be able to translate the energy from the engine, from the exploding gasoline in your engine, to the wheels in some way or form. And obviously, a transmission translates that energy proportionately, depending on, you know, your distribution to each wheel. And this just eliminates that. It's direct to the wheels. So it saves a lot of weight, first of all. That's a very big thing. And it was actually developed in-house again by the engineering team and Christian himself. They all worked alongside. And yeah, it's just nuts. I don't want to go too into depth on this one because it's just enough said, really. But essentially, the reasoning why they did this is they figured out there was a lot of energy loss here. So between the transmission and the drive shaft and the actual wheels is where the most energy was lost from the engine. So obviously, making everything 1% better, doing their engineering things to make the fastest car on the planet, they were thinking with everything in mind, right? Energy loss, weight savings, and this does both of those things. So it's definitely a step forward for that. It's actually pretty incredible if you think about it.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, the Koenigsegg Regera has this. It doesn't have speeds. And I watched a video. It's very... So the way Christopher was explaining it is it's so simple that it's hard to understand.
Yeah.
But in reality, the power's coming from the engine. That's all standard. Crankshaft or the camshaft sending power. But instead of going to a drive line and transmission, it goes to this. It's almost like a gearbox, but no gears. And there's a metal plate, two metal plates that contact. So initially, to like get off the line, it's essentially like a clutch. It engages the metal plate, and then initially to get off, it's metal on metal. But then there's fluid, like very dense fluid, that essentially moves the plate back and still applying pressure, and pushes the plate further and further and further, and it's almost working like gears.
That's crazy.
And the more speed and the faster the fluid goes, it pushes it further and further, and it sounds too simple. I'm sure there's but essentially that's what it is. And if you ever watch a video of a Koenigsegg Regera taken off the line,
there's no shifting.
There's no shifting, but also it's weird because the engine is like, in a normal car, you hear an engine go through the RPMs, like 1,000 to 7,000 or whatever the shift, and then back to, let's say, 5,000, and then it keeps going up because, you know, you're taking
gears.
You're taking off the pressure, so it drops. But in this car, it's just gradually going to, I don't know, 9,000 RPM or something. So it's slowly going up. And the way to think about it is, let's say you're on a bike and go in the highest gears, like top of the gear.
Really slow.
At the start, it's really slow, but then eventually you get to speed, and then you go super fast. So it's not faster. I don't think it's faster than like acceleration.
Mm-hmm.
But in the long run, I think 0 to 100 to 0 is faster than most cars. But it's not like record shattering.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, the torque curve must be kind of weird then, because obviously the gears are for high-end torque with, you know, leaving in first gear, like driving off in first gear. So I'm curious how that would be with this one, because obviously if you think about being on a bike and being in the lowest gear and then trying to pedal, it's fucking impossible. So like, I can only imagine for a car, you know, trying to put its power down, how much momentum you need to get that going.
Well, mind you, it is like 1,300 horsepower engine, so it's not...
It'll probably still be like 3 seconds to 100 or something ridiculous, and then feel like...
Probably, but in this case, it's cool. I don't know if there's any implication, because you can never do that, let's say, with a Honda Civic.
Yeah.
It doesn't have enough power to get going, so it's just, I guess, pushing the boundaries, but I don't know how much implication it can have in the future.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that. And kind of touching on this too, like, they also have like the light speed tourbillon transmission, it's called. I don't know if I pronounced the French right, but close enough. So this was actually, I'm going to butcher the name again, Jumeirah?
Yeah, I think it's Chimera.
Chimera, sure. So this was actually designed for the Chimera, which is really interesting. It's a very lightweight transmission, kind of going with the whole flavor of a smaller engine with this car. So it's a mechanical mechanism it's like improving accuracy, like in a high-end watch. So that's what the tourbillon is. And again, that's where it gets its name. So that's where they get their inspiration, again, related to the watch. So it's a mechanism to improve the accuracy, which is what it's trying to do for the car as well. So the Lightspeed transmission was actually first used in the Jesko, but then they added the tourbillon aspect to increase accuracy in the Chimera. So this is very interesting as well. It's not quite like the direct drive transmission. What was the name of that again? The direct drive transmission. But it adds a kind of a level of complexity and was a bit of a tweak from the Lightspeed transmission. So nothing too game-changing from the original one, but very, very interesting because there's no reverse gear, first of all. And there's no need for a separate starter, which is interesting. So everything actually is built into this transmission without a reverse gear. So I guess that also helps reduce weight and stuff as well. So you just got to get out and push the car. I don't know.
There's no way it can't reverse.
It's probably some weird extra thing they have to put on it or something. I don't know. But technically this transmission itself doesn't have a reverse. So
maybe I think you can. Maybe the first gear, because it rotates one way to move forward, so maybe it can also go the other way. So you technically first gear is forward and reverse. Maybe that's.
I'm curious, yeah, because is this a road legal car?
Yeah, so this
it's got to have reverse then, yeah.
Chimera, I think it's still not released. They're still building prototypes in the factory, but this thing has gone through a lot of iteration. At first, it was supposed to be the most horsepower. I think it was 800 horsepower 3-cylinder.
That's insane.
But now they scratched it, and now they're doing twin turbo V8. It's still 1,000 horsepower, and they're using the small transmission because it's a 4-seater. So it's gonna be the first 4-seater for Koenigsegg. But it's just from the concept. Of course, it's not real yet, but from the concept, it's just insane. The car, because it's rear engine, so the front, you got room in there, you got 4 seats, but you also have a boot, in the back.
Really?
So I don't know where the engine, transmission, anything, it just looks like there's no engine.
I do like that they're kind of going that route though. Obviously they're still hyper ridiculously expensive cars, but they're going that direction of making more consumer friendly cars, not just focused on top speed shit. So I kind of like that, but. To your point, I don't know where they're shoving all this stuff. It's probably right in the middle of the car, almost on the ground or something.
Yeah, so that explains this need for a tiny transmission, because the Jesko transmission was already tiny and super light, and now this even smaller. So
crazy. They just keep going, and again, this is fully designed in house from pretty much scratch, which is wild. So and I guess this is a good time to ask the question. So if you're Christian von Koenigsegg, right? You're this innovative guy. You're all right, I'm trying to build this hypercar company. I love how these things look. I want to create a legendary company. Do you think you'd go to this extent to put all this R&D in, put all this work in, hire all these engineers to create all these parts yourself in house, or would you be easier in outsourcing certain things, or maybe if you had certain parts, what would you want to focus on building in-house?
It's hard, because so when Koenigsegg started, I think their engines were sourced from Ford. They were supercharged V8s from Ford. And they were relatively good cars, but I can see when you're a perfectionist, you get this need to touch everything and perfect everything, but you can also kind of see how it's shaped the company. They're not building huge amount of cars every year. They're costing a lot of money.
Overall, they produce so many of their own things, but just to list off a few here, they produce their own inverters, their own transmissions, electric motors, even engines, carbon technology, car bodies, internals, and obviously anything special needed to break a record. So a lot of these things, not everything, but a lot of it is built in-house, which is pretty crazy.
The craziest part is I mean, to me, the carbon.
Yeah.
Making carbon is
Dude, it's
hell intensive.
It's whack. Like, you have to, like, weave that shit. I don't even know if there's a machine that can do it. I think it's mostly done by hand if you want to do it done properly.
No, it's machine, but it's mostly like compressing is like huge machines. And
Yeah,
then the
that too.
resin, and then it takes forever.
But even, like, I know there's some smaller parts in, like, Pagani's that are, like, hand woven, which is crazy. Like, you can kind of see the imperfections, which kind of makes it special, which is whack. But I don't even know. There's just, like, whole levels to this shit. Alright, now for the exciting stuff, though. Let's talk about the new CC850, because this is obviously kind of combining a lot of these technologies into one crazy-ass car, and honestly, it does mark a really interesting point in their history, because it's 20 years of building their cars. It's an anniversary. Christian's 50th birthday, which is kind of cool. And then the original CC8S, which is kind of like a tribute to that car, I guess, which put the company on the map in the first place. So if you guys have had a chance to see this car, I mean, just everything about it is pretty striking. It looks fantastic. But the thing that really stood out to me about this car, and you can see on their website as well if you want to see in-depth photos and stuff what it looks like, is the Engage Shift system, which they call their ESS system. No, just ESS. That would be system twice. But yeah, essentially what this is, it's very reminiscent of Pagani, because in the Huayra we had this transmission that was... It showed the gears and everything, kind of like in a Victorian style. You could see the gears move as you used your manual transmission with a simple clutch, but you could also make it so that you put it into an automatic mode where you could use paddles, which was crazy. So Koenigsegg
Is that a thing for Pagani? Is that a thing?
I don't know if the automatic thing is actually, but I know for a fact you could put it in automatic or you can have it in manual. There's two options, but it's just there for show, kind of, if you wanted the manual. But in this case, you do have the paddles. I actually don't remember if the Huayra's paddles. We can look that up afterwards. But the Koenigsegg has this transmission that it has the 6 gears. It has, like, you can see everything happening. You can see right underneath what's going on with the gears and everything. It's a beautiful wooden lever with the Koenigsegg logo on top. And you can use it as a normal gated 6-speed transmission with a clutch and everything. But if you get tired and you're driving like city traffic, you can actually put it in D, which is kind of that 7th or 8th slot there. And then you can put it into automatic mode and use the paddles with dual clutch transmission, which is pretty sweet. Like, I don't even want to think about how much complex technology is behind switching from a manual clutch to a dual clutch to, you know what I mean? Like, it's wild.
It's insane, yeah.
Like, to even think about how they started putting this together, I don't even know what to think when you think about that, but it's very cool that you could choose.
I would love to drive that.
We've talked about this before, like how cool it would be if all the technologies this came to ordinary cars, or at least maybe like $100,000 to $200,000 range. Like, that would be incredible. If you could choose when you want to drive gated manual, like, it'd be the ultimate driver's car. You know what I mean? Because go on a back road, pop that thing in 6-speed manual mode, just driving through the gears, or in the city, just dual clutch. Like, you can do whatever you want.
We're kind of losing that at this point.
Yeah.
Because Porsche still has manual, thank God. I guess we have like the Supra. I don't know about BMWs if they make any manual, but it's so limited. But to have, because I feel like the solution nowadays to evolve is just go automatic and dual clutch and all this stuff. But to have someone innovate and kind of take a step back, but also take a step forward. So doing, going back to manual,
both technologies,
then improving manual, that's huge. And I really hope, we'll probably keep manual forever, but I really hope it trickles down into other cars.
I think it will, honestly. If there's, like any technology, once it gets to that scale point where it becomes, something that's ordinary and normal to produce at like an affordable price, I think it definitely will come down. It comes with economies of scale. So it's really just about mass producing this over time and trying to simplify the technology. But I mean, this is fantastic. Like you said, I'd love to try this. It'd probably be so trippy though. Like, if you're using a clutch and then you put an automatic, it'd just feel illegal. Not driving with the clutch, you'd feel like you're breaking the car.
Yeah.
It'd just feel weird.
Yeah, it would be weird because you race home in manual, and then tomorrow you put in automatic. And then
Yeah.
how does that work? Does the clutch still work? Is like you could stall the car, or
That's what I'm
I don't
wondering.
know.
Yeah, or maybe it just doesn't do anything. It's like a dummy pedal when it's in drive.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It'd be interesting to see just living with this car.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you can't really live it. It's a $3 million car.
Maybe
Just-
some people can.
Yeah, just like experiencing just a normal day with this car and see how it feels, getting used to it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fantastic thing, and just like reading about this makes me happy because it brings back that fire of car passion again, right? Like what we talked about. Again, this is a big established company, but still, it's just it's really cool. But I really like how they brought back that same body style from like the CCX era and like the whole old Koenigsegg feeling, which is really cool. And I think that's obviously part of the tribute, what they tried to bring back. But I really love where they went with this.
That's probably one of my favorite things is technically it's called like retro mod. So taking an old car and making it new. So,
Yeah.
the
It's like
easiest...
the next episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The hint in the next episode.
Teaser.
Like the biggest thing is just like switching to LED lights and like making it more curvy, but it's just taking a classic and just reimagining it in today's time. I think if it's well done, some cars don't pull it off, but
Yeah.
this one is just...
I mean, it's just a masterpiece, honestly. And just the way they've brought back the spirit, but like you said, in a more modern way is super cool to see. And especially for cars, like it's something that's so valued by people and has such emotional charge with it. So that I feel like this is a perfect way to do it. Another thing I want to quickly touch on is the Chrono cluster, they call it. Again, reminiscent of watches, but it has this huge dial in the middle of the dash, and it has the tachometer on the inside. On the outside is the speed. You have the tachometer on the inside, and then you have the turbo pressure in the middle, which is super cool. So you have 3 layers, and it looks exactly like a watch. You have the watch hands and everything that kind of move in a similar fashion. So again, the attention to detail here is awesome.
And it's a piece of art. Right?
Yeah, it really is. Like, I'll put a
Amazing.
photo in the video here, but it's just incredible to look at. Like, I'd probably crash this car looking at that thing. It's not great for that reason, but it's crazy. And even I noticed, like, I was just going through the website, and obviously their attention to detail, so I noticed even the numbers are OCD here. Like, you have the CC850, it's called, and you get 1,385 horsepower. It weighs 1,385 kilograms, so again, it's a 1-to-1. We have 1,385 newton meters of torque, and then we have 185 kilograms engine weight. So again, I don't know, is that why it's called the 850? Maybe. They don't have the 0 in there, but I'm guaranteeing you if you put the 0.0. It's kind of interesting they didn't do that, actually, the 0.0, because that would make it the whole 850. But maybe that's the whole reasoning behind this whole thing. The 85 in there. But anyways. So yeah, what are our thoughts overall about the company? Do you think they've gone to a level where, they're at this point of perfectionism that they've slowed production so much because they're doing so much R&D, and that's why they're not mass producing? Or do you think this is beneficial to push the car industry forward? Where do you kind of think they fall on this chart? And like, in general, like, do you think their innovation is maybe a bit more stifled because they are spending so much time developing these things, or do you think it's a good thing?
I think it's a great thing. They've definitely pushed the envelope, and that's what you need in like car markets, is because Bugatti for a while was the fastest car, the, dare I say, like only hypercar out there, and then these guys came along and like kind of pushed the boundaries and woke up Bugatti and like, hey, you got a competitor now.
Yeah.
Let's wrap it up. And also just all the great things they've done. I love the Agera.
It's such a good looking car.
It's good looking. It sounds amazing. I would love to hear one in person.
I have a video of it's like driving. I think it's like straight pipe, but it has just like this insane turbo whistle on top of this like crunchy V8. Like it sounds absolutely amazing. Like
The best way to describe it is just thunder.
Yeah.
It's thunder.
I actually need to show you
exhaust.
this video, and I'll put a link in the description as well, because it's such a delight listening to that. Like, I can literally watch that 15, 20 times and be like, oh my god, it sounds so good. Can't even imagine in person what these would sound like, but...
And the good news is they're just wrapping up the new expansion of their factory. So now, before it was one production line, but now they got two, so they can like
Shit.
make cars, double the cars essentially.
It's gonna be wild.
So yeah.
Hopefully that ramps things up and we can kind of get more to that mass-produced level.
Yeah, because like their cars are nice, but they're limited. Like the Agera, I think there's less than 50 with the Agera R, maybe less than 100 total. So it's insane.
Very limited, yeah.
Yeah, and
what about the Jesko, do you know?
there's a bit more production. I think it's 180.
Still not much.
But yeah, like this is for the whole world. This is nothing. Like
Still, if you think about what they're netting, if they're pulling in 2 to 3 million a car, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like it's, I mean, obviously there's a lot of R&D, there's huge factories, there's employees you have to pay, but still, it's pretty significant, over, you know, half $500 million a year. It's
Yeah.
pretty solid.
well
but-
deserved though. Like
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they've worked their ass off for this shit, and I mean, yeah, I'm just surprised they don't produce more. Again, maybe that's part of why, like maybe they want to limit numbers so that it is more valuable. Possible.
yeah, that's like definitely quality over quantity for them.
Definitely, yeah. But anyway, I want to leave you guys with this quote on their website, which I really liked. This is kind of their overall motto, and it's the show must go on. So I mean, I think that speaks perfectly to their whole character and what they do. If something hasn't been created themselves, the show must go on,
Yeah.
and they'll make it happen. But yeah, that's pretty much all about Koenigsegg. Pretty fantastic company. Is there anything else you want to add?
That's it.
Awesome. All right. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and we'll see you next week for episode 48, which is also a banger. So make sure to check in for that one. But yeah, we'll see you guys next week. Goodbye.
Goodbye.